Dzień dobry.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to all of you present in the room and also all our webcast viewers watching us and listening to us online. To the conference devoted to the performance of the Grupa Azoty group companies in the first quarter of 2019. Today's speakers will include Wojciech Bardacki, PhD, President of the Management Board of Grupa Azoty S.A. and Grupa Azoty Police. Mr. Paweł Łapiński, Vice President of the Management Board of Grupa Azoty S.A. Izabela Świderek, PhD, Vice President of the Grupa Azoty Puławy Group. Mr. Włodzimierz Zasadzki, PhD, Vice President of the Board of Grupa Azoty Police. Mr. Sławomir Lipkowski, President of the Board of Grupa Azoty Kędzierzyn. I'll now give the floor over to our CEO. Thank you very much and welcome to all of you present in the room and also to all our webcast viewers. And welcome to the next conference, at which we will summarize our performance after the first quarter of 2019. Not much time elapsed after we last met, has elapsed after we last met, when we met to discuss and present and discuss the entire year of 2018. At that point, we mentioned and presented certain estimates for the first quarter of the year. And those estimates are well in line and in keeping with the actual results which will be presented today. Many events that took place in the first quarter have been mentioned already last month. I would like to draw your attention specifically to certain matters and issues which are of key importance and were of key importance for the Grupa Azoty group in the first quarter. Most specifically, I'm referring to the major capex projects to which we devoted a lot of time and energy and effort, and which have been observed and watched very closely. By which I specifically mean the major investment of Grupa Azoty Group and also a major investment for the entire Polish economy. I'm referring to Polimery Police, the project in progress. I would like to mention again that this project is quite different from what our predecessors mentioned and announced back in 2015. After a series of analysis, the project was supposed to be completed after the production of polypropylene. Having analyzed the risks and the data for this particular project, the group decided to extend the production chain, which will end with the production of not propylene but polypropylene. These two projects are therefore uncomparable. They're not on par to be compared, the previous one and then this current one. We are also developing our storage base and also the seaport, the riverport at Police. I would like to mention it quite expressly, as Mr. Jałosiński has publicly recently mentioned that this project has virtually nothing to do with the project that he promoted, or, so to speak, tried to promote or tried to launch. The schedule that was adopted in 2016/17 has been implemented consistently. There are no delays. A number of milestones have already been completed earlier. So we are well ahead of the schedule, as we have defined certain risk beforehand in a more conservative way, so to speak. The project work is progressing as planned. There have been a number of concerns which were voiced publicly are absolutely ungrounded as to the method of our equity construction or a structure and the entire financing structure. Therefore, I do believe that these concerns were absolutely ungrounded. Our project is progressing as planned based on the project finance model, and the assumptions related to the financing have been met. There might be a certain problem with the number, the excessive number of those parties who would like to participate in our equity. We estimated that number at around 880 million PLN. Right now, this number, or this figure, is quite higher. We are currently looking at 3 entities involved and another one, or the other 2 ones that either are analyzing the project or have declared their participation. In April, we secured the consent from the Grupa Azoty Police shareholders to carry out a public offering, subject to the existing shareholders' preemptive rights, up to the amount of around PLN 1 billion to be earmarked and to be applied towards the completion of the PDH project. Letters of intent, or an initial preliminary letter of intent signed with the Koreans, by PDH Polska, and also with the governmental agency and with Hyundai Engineering, turned into an agreement signed by Grupa Azoty S.A., Grupa Azoty Police, and PDH Polska with the entities I have just mentioned. Right now, this work entered into a more detailed arrangement phase, and we're looking at signing of a specific, more detailed agreement concerning the launch of this project, to be completed with the Korean partners. We're talking about PLN 330 million. This has been declared, and we do believe that there are no grounds for any concerns as far as this capital involvement or engagement of those parties is concerned. We are also in touch with Lotos. Lotos is carrying out their analysis of the model so that they can secure their own corporate decisions and approvals and finalize or deliver the letter of intent and their declaration of involvement, capital involvement at 500 million. We are also waiting for the decisions of another project. We are talking about 200 million PLN. It is a major business partner acting or engaged in the operations of polypropylene. All in all, we are talking about 1.7 billion, whereas we previously expected around 800 to 900 million PLN. This obviously has an impact on the structure of our financing for this project. The next stage was set primarily or preliminarily on September. We do not see any threat to the delivery of that particular schedule. Last week, we had a major milestone. We signed an agreement with the general contractor, namely Hyundai Engineering, and we launched work. Koreans are very much looking into the launch of that work. They have been preparing for the launch of that project. They have prepared themselves to launch the project. I'm talking about their own contracts. So Hyundai is well prepared and ready to start construction work on the construction side as soon as possible. We have also set the deadline for the launch of construction work in for the first quarter of 2020. We might launch that work earlier. At the end of 2020, we will be looking at the completion of this project. And I do believe that this deadline will be met with no problems. In your materials, you have also information on certain competitive advantages and certain parameters of that project of Polimery Police. We are also talking about the logistics side and the technology that we have purchased. It will all enable us to move on to more complicated phases of that project for more advanced polypropylene formulas. This is not included in that preliminary project because we have, as I mentioned, we have assumed certain conservative basis for this project. The effects of that project will include, or key benefits of the project will include diversification of our revenue streams, additional profits, expansion of the project portfolio, and flattening out of business cycles. One more thing I'd like to mention, this intention will be beneficial for all group companies, for Puławy, for Kędzierzyn, and also for Tarnów, because it will enable them to modernize, or us to modernize, the only unit that produces multi-compound fertilizers at Police. This production area has been quite neglected in certain respects. We are working on it to improve that situation. So we will reach certain modernization and upgrades work at Police. We'll reach that stage. Without that particular production unit, there's no chance for the group to function successfully in the market, because our competitive advantage lies primarily in our production portfolio, and the proportion in our production mix and production portfolio has changed. I am specifically referring to compound fertilizers. We will stand greater chance to successfully sell and place on the market our products as a result. This slide shows quite explicitly, or presents quite explicitly, the major parameters of that project. We have mentioned the target market for that project. For us, of course, it is limited to Europe, to the Baltic Sea, and also includes Turkey. We have discussed the project quite extensively during our annual performance conference. I would not like to repeat myself, but I would like to mention that in the first quarter, to our great satisfaction, two group companies, namely Grupa Azoty S.A. and also Grupa Azoty Police S.A., were awarded a title for the most transparent company of 2018. It was a third edition of that particular ranking. Announced by the Parquet Daily and also other partners, and supported by the Warsaw Stock Exchange. This is an important award because the winners were voted for. And thank you very much to our investors who have voted for us. And it gives us a lot of satisfaction that our business and the transparency of our activities are well recognized. We're doing our best to be quite open to our investors and present all the information that can be presented to them. Our major figures have not deviated from our estimates. The consolidated revenue came in at more than 3.3 billion PLN. This is a major record-breaking figure for us. This is a highlight for us because it includes also the results delivered by Combo Expert. This is the highest figure in our history for quarter 1, 2019. we have seen a major improvement in consolidated EBITDA, which came in at 608 million PLN. Consolidated EBIT came in at 408, and net profit came in at 323 million PLN. I will now give the floor over to Mr. Łapiński to discuss the performance of the entire group in more detail and also by individual companies, which will be presented later by other speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, as the CEO mentioned, when we looked at Q1, our performance was record-breaking, which was to a great extent fueled and boosted by the performance of Combo Expert. But if we disregard the performance of Combo Expert, our performance would have been record-breaking as well. Our revenue improved by around 900 million versus last year, and our EBITDA increased by 50% and came in at 608 million PLN. Looking at our performance by segment and at our sales structure, we can see a major change. Traditional fertilizers represent 47%, which is the lowest level ever, because as we have declared earlier, we will be reducing that share gradually. Specialty fertilizers accounted for 15%. The chemicals accounted for 22%, and plastics accounted for 12%. Let me draw attention to the fact that the fertilizer segment generated the highest EBITDA ever. Looking at our geographical structure, it also changed quite dramatically after the acquisition of Combo Expert. The share of the Polish market went down to 50%, and previously it represented around 58-57%. And the share of Combo Expert in Poland is only 8 million in Poland, which has a great potential for improvement, and we have taken certain steps to enhance the position and the market share of Combo Expert in Poland. We will use and tap all our business contacts to achieve that goal. As far as the European Union is concerned, Combo Expert's share is higher than in the European Union, excluding Poland, than Grupa Azoty in terms of fertilizers. In all other areas, Grupa Azoty is has the dominant share. However, following the acquisition of Combo Expert, we improved our market share in other locations outside of Europe, such as North America, South America, and Asia. Our EBITDA improved, year-on-year, which was mainly due to higher sales volumes and prices. Obviously, we had a negative effect of higher costs. I am talking mainly about the prices of raw materials, potassium chloride, phosphate rock, as well as coal and propylene. Gas, on the other hand, unlike previously, had a positive effect on our EBITDA. And additionally, we had a positive contribution from Combo Expert. Moving on to the fertilizer segment, which dominated in Q1, I'd like to draw attention to the change. Year-on-year, last year, the fertilizer business was in not a very good shape, mainly due to the situation in the gas market. We can still see certain volatility in the market. However, this time, the effect or the contribution of gas price is positive for us. Our EBITDA came in at 412. Our segment revenue came in at more than 2 billion PLN. Our EBITDA went up quite considerably. We are monitoring closely our stock levels, both in Poland and in the European Union. This level went down, which is a good sign, and it gives us room to sell more products, especially considering that we still are waiting for the next application of fertilizers at the turn of May and June. So the potential for the fertilizers to be used for certain crops is still there. We are unfortunately looking at a certain slump in terms of our prices. However, we do hope that the prices will be higher than last year, which will give us room for improvement later on, considering the seasonality of our sales. We do not see any major threats at this point in that particular respect on the market. The market seems stable and quite optimistic, and the outlook is quite optimistic. Looking at our import sales, you can see that there's shortage of urea, but I do believe that we will take advantage of that particular gap. Obviously, there is a certain factor that has a major impact on our sales figures and on our customers. I am specifically referring to weather. Our part of Europe, certain Central and Eastern Europe, will, according to analysis, see good, quite high increases in sales and in crops. You can see that Poland, Germany, Italy, the UK, and France are looking at quite an optimistic situation, unlike Hungary, Spain, or Romania. This is obviously related to the weather conditions, especially in Spain, that has a very difficult situation because the weather conditions in Spain for the past 3 years is very bad, and there are no signs of improvement. Let me go back to Compo Expert in terms of the performance of the fertilizers segment. The segment revenue is just under 500 PLN. EBITDA came in at 45 million. This figure would have been different. However, we needed to spend certain costs and incur certain costs. First of all, related to the acquisition, the transaction itself, because we needed certain spending on audits and other analysis. I am also talking about other costs related to the integration with Compo Expert. We are working to deliver synergies. This requires a lot of discussions, visits, and support. This had a certain impact on our results. However, it will bear fruit in near future. And there's one other negative factor on Compo Expert's performance, a difficult situation in Argentina. There is devaluation of the local currency there and quite an inflation of around 40%. The situation is not stable in that particular market. However, we have taken certain steps and we have already seen effects in the first quarter. I do believe that we will see an improved situation in the second quarter. The geographical structure of Compo Expert's business, 60%, the European Union is 60%, and other Europe and other parts of the world is 40%, both in fertilizers and especially specialty fertilizers. We saw that the sales volumes were growing. A couple of words about the chemicals segment. The performance of our chemicals segment is weaker but this is well in line with the announcements that we have communicated to you. The revenue stayed more or less flat. However, EBITDA of the chemicals segment went down to 102 million PLN. Let me discuss a number of major products. As far as melamine is concerned, the demand is quite stable. However, there are price pressures, mainly due to better access to cheaper products from China or Russia. The same for titanium white. We have a price war with China, and obviously has an impact on our performance, both for melamine and titanium white. China is looking for the channel or the outlet for their cheaper products in the markets other than the US, and therefore it has an impact on our prices. In terms of oxo alcohols, especially DHT, our market is stable. Plasticizers are growing, and production capacities of plasticizers is growing. In terms of plasticizers specifically, there are certain concerns I need to voice at this point, because there is a new plant that was launched for plasticizers, and some of that production will be placed or will be sent to the European market. In terms of plastics, our segment revenue stayed quite flat at 408. EBITDA went down by 10%, going down to 55 million PLN. Looking at our market outlook versus 2018, we did have certain concerns, and you have voiced your own concerns and doubts as to the plastics segment and its performance. You can see that the weakening performance, that the performance is not as weak as we had expected. So the plastics segment fares quite well on the market, and the EBITDA went down by only 10%, which is not a major drop. There are certain problems in terms of raw materials, especially of phenol and benzene. Phenol prices are quite high versus benzene prices, and this has an impact on our margins. And this situation might continue in the months to come. Obviously, this situation can be reversed as well. As you are well aware, our strategy is based on building another part of that production chain, compound plastics. At Tarnów, we are building a unit for producing higher processed plastics. We will launch that unit at the end of the year, and the production capacity will reach around 50,000 tons. This should stabilize our margins in the long term. And we're also looking at PA6. We are looking for certain opportunities to sell other products than the most popular products. We are working on foil polyamide in order to increase the sales of our products in that particular area. Major capital expenditure projects in 2019 are listed on this slide number 19. At Puławy, this will be discussed later on, so maybe I will skip that particular slide, and it will be discussed later by my colleagues. Let me go back to investments. We were looking at the 2019 capex at 1.3 billion PLN, and our forecast is still the same. And this excludes capital expenditure on Polimery Police. A couple of words about our financing strength. Our net debt to EBITDA went up slightly. Especially, this was mainly due to the effect of International Financial Reporting Standard 16. Our limits stayed more or less the same. And net debt, let me remind you about our covenants in the agreements at 3 points. And this figure went up to 3.5. This is a maximum net debt to EBITDA covenant. Let me now give the floor over to Mrs. Izabela Świderek to discuss the performance at Grupa Azoty Puławy. Ladies and gentlemen, the first quarter of 2019 for Grupa Azoty Puławy saw very high revenue at the end of the quarter. This is the highest ever performance, excluding the year of 2015, and it came in at 1,069,000,000 PLN compared to the previous year and the first quarter of the previous year. It went up by 17% year on year. Our revenue in the first quarter was fueled mainly by the sales in the agro segment at 184 million PLN. 184 million PLN. Our EBITDA and net profit figures went up as well. However, they were impacted by the costs, which had a positive effect in the first quarter, mainly in terms of prices of our strategic raw materials and feedstocks, especially the prices of gas. And the same for benzene. It also had a positive impact on our performance and especially revenue. The positive impact was at 42%. However, on the other hand, we saw a slight increase in the prices of electrical energy and hard coal, which increased our selling costs, and the effect was at 58 million. This has also impacted our EBITDA. Our EBITDA came in at, all in all, 269 million, which is up, which is doubled versus our previous figure reported for 2018. Agro segment had a positive contribution on our EBITDA, mainly based on the higher prices of our products. I am talking about the cumulative effect of both product prices and higher sales volumes. The effect was 53 million. Whereas selling prices had a positive effect of 105 million PLN. In terms of key EBITDA drivers, as I have just mentioned, sales volumes in the agro segment especially, most of our projects, or all of our projects virtually, reported higher sales volumes, and the same goes for prices, mainly in terms of nitrogen-based fertilizers, but also phosphorus fertilizers and compound fertilizers. The prices of all these projects were higher than a year before. However, there were lower prices reported for the chemicals, especially melamine and caprolactam. They were sold at lower prices year on year, so the price decrease was reported. And the same goes for sales volumes, especially in terms of melamine. There was a positive effect of the prices of strategic raw materials, especially for gas, which contributed to our EBITDA, bringing around 12 million PLN. And the same for benzene prices. However, this effect was offset to a certain extent by the negative effect of other prices of other raw materials. The prices of CO2 emission allowances fluctuated in quarter one. On average, the price was up by 10% year-on-year. This also had an effect on our EBITDA figure. Going into more detail, by segment. In the first quarter, in our fertilizers segment, the situation was quite good. The fertilizers segment revenue came in at nearly 700 million PLN, of which 87 or 82% was due to high sales of nitrogen fertilizers. The prices of most of our products, as I have mentioned before, were higher year-on-year. Let me just mention an example. An increase in liquid fertilizer prices ranged from 22% for UAN to more than 27% for other products. So this is a major positive change. For other products, the increase was lower, but still was there. For instance, ammonia nitrate, the price for ammonia nitrate went up by 16%. The same for phosphate fertilizers. They also had an impact on our EBITDA in terms of the segment revenue as well. The increase in prices were lower, but still came in at around 18%, for instance, in case of certain products in the fertilizer segment. In terms of our geographical structure, fertilizers were mainly sold in foreign markets, and the share of exports versus last year went down slightly. However, if we look at the structure of our revenue, we will see that the fertilizers segment came in or generated the majority of our revenue in that particular segment. The chemicals segment went down slightly in terms of the segment revenue, which came in at 346 million PLN, with the breakdown for individual products. Melamine represents around 40% of our sales, more or less the same for caprolactam, and 20% for urea. In terms of geographical structure for our chemicals segment, our export sales is at around 54% of our revenue, and it went down year-on-year by more than 5% percentage points. As we have mentioned before, our segment revenue for chemicals was lower than a year before, which was due to lower sales volumes, mainly in terms of melamine, which had a major impact of 7 million PLN, or minus 7 million PLN in the first quarter of the year. And also lower product prices had an impact both in terms of melamine and caprolactam. Still, our EBITDA for the chemicals segment is higher than a year before, mainly owing to lower prices of our strategic raw materials. In the first quarter of the year, we had a number of major events and highlights. I would like to only focus on two, which are presented on this particular slide. The first one is the largest investment planned by Grupa Azoty Puławy, the construction of a new generation unit, energy generation unit. We accepted a preliminary bid in the tender procedure, contract award procedure, and the bid was placed by a consortium of companies comprising Polimex Mostostal of Warsaw. We have analyzed that bid, which was more than 1.1 billion PLN, which means that is necessary for us to update our financing schedule for that particular project. But as far as the selection, the final selection or final decision is concerned, the final decision will be taken in the third quarter of this year, and the investment will take 36 months. And we will build a new coal-fired generation unit with a capacity of 100 megawatts of electricity and 300 megawatts of heat. The second highlight is related to another contract signed with LERG S.A. of Pustkowo as part of our partnership. The contract is around 53 million PLN, and it concerns the sales of melamine and urea. The contract will be implemented and delivered in stages in 2019 to 2021, in the period of 2019-2021. In addition to our major highlights, we are also working on a daily basis to implement other projects, investment projects. And in the first quarter, we spent nearly 80 million PLN. As you can see, the structure of our capex is related mainly to business growth, and the business growth capex represents 60%, which means that we are mostly focused on building new installations and upgrading existing units in order to increase our efficiency, improve our efficiency, increase certain parameters in order to meet legal requirements. The major capex projects include the upgrade of the nitric acid unit. This is a project in progress. It will be, the completion date is 2024. We have already spent more than 18 million PLN in quarter one, and total cost today is more than 100 million PLN. Most of the spending is accounted for by the parent company. However, at Grupa Azoty Puławy as well, we are delivering our capex projects. As time goes by, our capex figures will increase during the year. Thank you very much for your attention. I would like to mention that at the end, that in the first quarter, both in the parent company and in the subsidiaries of Grupa Azoty Puławy Group, we had no problems with our financial liquidity. There are no threats to our financial covenants and payments outstanding to our customers. Still, net debt to EBITDA is negative. However, on the safe side, the same goes for liquidity ratios. Thank you very much for your attention, and now we'll move on to discussing the financial performance and the performance of Grupa Azoty Police. I'll now give the floor over to Mr. Włodzimierz Zasadzki. Thank you very much. Before today's meeting, we received congratulations for our solid performance, and my response was only one word: the market. When the market fares negative, when the market conditions are unfavorable, you need to minimize the negative effects of market problems as far as possible. We managed to achieve that goal last year. When the market fares well, you need to tap those opportunities, and I do believe we have, because everything has its reasons. We do not operate in a void, so to speak. If the market is good, if the market situation is positive and advantageous, and I'm specifically referring to the low price of gas, which is the lowest price that we have observed for years and years. However, we see an increase in prices in other raw materials, such as potassium chloride or phosphates, and these increases are major in terms of the price hikes. Still, we need to face competition. We also need to face competition in the market. So the competitive pressures have not diminished. They're still there, and there's still a situation which is difficult for us in terms of competitive pressures. However, we have established a strong sales muscle in the company. I'm talking about the sales department. We have a very consistent policy. We're able to offer a full palette, a full portfolio of products. And due to all those actions and measures that we have taken, we saw an improvement on our EBITDA and net profit as well as revenue. And I'm talking about major increases of around 50%. So the main source of our revenue and net profit was sales of compound fertilizers. Were the sales of compound fertilizers. In general, in the market, especially in Europe, we see that nitrogen fertilizer sales is going down and has been going down for a certain time, which was due to the legislation imposed by the European Union. We therefore are working on the close cooperation and partnership with our partners, with our business partners, distributors. We saw an increase in sales by around 24% in the first quarter, which was due to higher sales of compound fertilizers. I will not discuss in more detail all those figures. You can analyze it for yourselves. However, neither urea nor ammonia contributed that much to our revenue in comparison with compound fertilizers. The same goes for the price war between the US and China, which has already been mentioned by the CEO. China is trying and doing their best to locate or to send their products to Europe. And their quality of their product used to be much, much worse. However, right now, the quality of their product is quite comparable to other products in the European market. Obviously, they have more room to compete with in prices. And the prices they're offering is around 10% lower than the prices offered in the European Union and also in the US. Therefore, we need to prepare ourselves. We are preparing our position to be communicated to the European Union so that the European Union decides to increase the customs duties for titanium white specifically, because there is a certain price dumping effect from China, and we need to counteract it. The conditions in titanium white market had an effect, a negative effect on our revenue and a major decrease in our EBITDA, especially compared to the last year, than the first quarter of the last year, which was exceptional for titanium white figures. In terms of the major highlights and key developments at Grupa Azoty Police, we are preparing ourselves to the issue of new shares and the planned share capital increase to secure more funding for capex projects. On the one hand, it is due to the limitations and the covenants in the contract and agreements with banks. As a group, our capital involvement is at 1.3 billion, and the share capital increase will increase that figure. We will have more room to participate, to have a capital involvement, and to tap certain benefits group-wide. There are certain issues that are difficult to discuss. Just a piece of information for you. We are in the process of testing a private investor. So in our prospectus, we will give you more detailed information. I would like to just mention that. And there are also certain technical and technological connections and links between Police and PDH, the project. We are preparing certain investments, key investments for the PDH project. I'm talking about the construction of an additional unit for the energy supply, electricity supply to Polimery Police. I am also talking about the supply of water, which is of key importance for the Polimery Police project, and also hydrogen supply, purified, almost nearly 100% pure hydrogen, which will be used by Police instead of natural gas, which means that we changed our CO2 emission figures. We reduced our emissions, and we will have less, we will need to buy less or fewer CO2 emission allowances. Obviously, hydrogen can be used for other purposes as well. We do not have the technology at that point, and we have certain problems with transports. There were probably a lot of customers who would like to buy hydrogen. However, at that point, we do not. Our opportunities, our potential in that particular area is limited. However, the installation will deliver 17,000 tons of hydrogen per year, which is a quite high figure. We also had certain investments in terms of logistics, because Polimery Police, the unit, is located in the very heart of our facility. So certain logistics investments were needed to make sure that both units function properly and efficiently. And also noise reduction projects, because there will be more noise with the new unit after it is brought on stream, up and running. Therefore, we will need to spend certain amount of money to reduce the noise levels in order to secure all our permits. So this investment is a key development, and I do believe that it will progress as planned with positive effects. I would like to mention and stress explicitly that we are ready to face any option in terms of the share issue. We're looking at the ramp placement as the third stage of that process. We are discussing certain options with two investors. So we rest assured, obviously we're looking at only the third stage of the issue, which might not really be necessary. But if it is, we will be ready to offer and place our new shares to specific investors with whom we are discussing the situation right now and consulting the options. One more interesting thing I'd like to mention for Grupa Azoty Police was related to a visit by the Korean governmental representatives and also Hyundai representatives at Police. Koreans were quite surprised that Europe has no such investments and has had no investments so far. Polypropylene needs to be imported to Europe, so Koreans were caught by surprise by it. And they have also emphasized that they treat this contract and also their capital involvement very seriously, because they will be involved at the capital level with the governmental agency. So they treat this project as a certain window of opportunity for their European operations, for their presence in Europe. And I do believe that there are other areas for our cooperation with Korean, and not only Korean, companies. Thank you very much. Moving on to discussing the performance of Grupa Azoty Kędzierzyn, Mr. Sławomir Lipkowski will present and discuss the performance of Kędzierzyn. Ladies and gentlemen, the first slide presents our revenue, which came in at 529 million PLN, which is a high level in comparison with a couple of previous years. For the producers of fertilizers and for Polish agriculture in general, the first quarter of this year was in a way untypical and non-standard, and it will probably be so in the years to come as well, because the application season and fertilizer season started only on March the 1st. In previous years, we saw a different situation. When snow melted, farmers could use nitrogen fertilizers at that very point. This year, they only started their applications on March the 1st. In areas when we sell our products, the weather conditions were favorable. We will focus on the first quarter, not the second quarter, mind you, but for the regions of Opole, Lower Silesia, and Western Europe, Western Poland, I'm sorry, these conditions were quite favorable. Still, the EBITDA figure at 93 million PLN was mainly due to the fertilizer segment's contribution at Kędzierzyn. And if we compare that particular figure to previous years, we can see that this level changed. And the key drivers of our EBITDA were the prices of nitrogen fertilizers, not only Salmak, Zaxen, and other popular fertilizer products which we produce, but also another product which I will discuss in more detail. I am talking about UAN, which is urea ammonium nitrate. We sold a lot of that product, and also the same applies for urea. The same applies to urea. Our revenue went down for other products due to lower sales volumes, specifically in the OXO segment. As far as fertilizers sales are concerned, the figures stayed more or less flat year on year. Moving on to the discussion of performance by segment. Segment revenue for fertilizers went up by 36 million. Specifically by 19% for nitrogen fertilizers. And our Redmax business is growing. It is related or connected to the fertilizers production line. The production unit is the same, however. Those products are not used for agricultural purposes, but for industrial purposes, which is related to the fact that we need to meet a lot of stringent requirements concerning protection of the natural environment. Our EBITDA came in at 74 million PLN in the first quarter of 2019 versus 40 million year on year. In terms of OXO alcohols segment, our revenue went down by 4%, which was due to limited access to products in the first quarter. However, as Mr. Łapiński has mentioned before, this market is mature. And in the first quarter, we saw balanced situation. We saw certain surplus figures for the products in that particular segment, especially plasticizers and 2EH. In terms of significant developments and highlights at Kędzierzyn, in partnership with one of our distributors at Świdnica, we opened a storage base for UAN, urea ammonium nitrate. We're talking about liquid fertilizers there. And the capacity of that storage base is quite high, which means that we can load and send full trains to our customers with that product. As a result, we do not need to transport that particular product using trucks, using a very crowded highway. We are using railway transport to deliver our products to our customers. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. Both you and webcast viewers will now have a chance to take part in investors' chat, which is planned for the next Tuesday, May the 28th at noon sharp. Next week, on Friday, May the 31st at noon again, we will present our polymer project at the Wall Street conference. So I do invite you as well to take part in that presentation. I'd like to extend my heartfelt thanks to all of you who were with us, joined us online. Please stay in touch with us and with the developments across the Grupa Azoty group. And I do hope that we will take part in the investors' chat next Tuesday, noon sharp. Thank you very much for your attention.